Hello, my name is Matthew Blackman. I am a historian and independent researcher who works with Peffers Fine Art, and we together have put on an exhibition of jazz photography, a journey to jazz, and this is a kind of selection of the best of that exhibition. So there are 5 photographers here, Afkamalo, Jürgen Schadeberg, G.R. Naidu, and Ernest Cole. They are all photographs that originate really from the 1950s and 60s. Some of them are a little bit older. For example, this photograph is of Miriam Makeba by Alf Thamalo at a concert in Lesotho in 1981. When she returned, it was billed as she was living in exile at the time, and it was billed as a return home concert. And some of the other photographs are just kind of in situ photographs. For example, Winston Mankunku, this is a very, very famous photograph of Winston Mankunku when he was recording his definitive album. This is a very famous photograph from a musical written by Todd Matsukiza and written by Alan Tatum, and is as a sort of photograph that has been used as a meme, I guess, across the world, and normally associated with the Harlem Renaissance, but actually originates in South Africa. That is a very famous photograph of Miriam Makeba by Jürgen Schadeberg, who was the photographer who trained most of these journalists and most of these photographers. 3 of my favorite photographs are really these 4 photographs, mainly not only because of the photographs themselves, but because of the stories behind them. Gideon Khumalo, possibly our greatest musician and composer in South African history, largely forgotten, made 2 of the great jazz albums of the 1960s. Philip Tabane and the Malombo Jazzmen. Julian Bahula is sitting there. Abby Twingvi is there. This was actually this was a concert in Orlando it was a competition that they won. And if you go onto Spotify, you can actually listen to the album that they produced. It's called the Castle Lager Jazz Festival 1964. And if you look on the microphones, you see Castle Lager has always been with us since the beginning of time. There it is. This, however, is my favorite story of the entire exhibition. I've spent 6 months trying to identify who this little child is in this Ernest Cole photograph. And 4 days ago, I made a breakthrough. And I discovered that this child turned out to be the trumpeter of Mango Groove, and that his son is the trumpeter of Mikasa. And there you see the grandfather, who was also in a famous set of bands in the 1950s and 60s, and he played with people like Zakes and Corsi and another group of very, very famous jazz musicians of that period. And finally, I guess maybe the last photograph we could look at is one of Julian Bahula and Philip Tabane, 2 of the greatest jazz musicians in South African history. They changed jazz fundamentally in the 1960s. And Julian Bahula ended up in exile, befriended people like Dumile Feni in exile. And he, in 1983 or 1982, I can't remember which date, organized a festival to celebrate the 65th birthday of Nelson Mandela. And at that festival, he sung out, "Free Nelson Mandela." And that became this meme across the world. And it kind of changed history in many ways. The anti-apartheid movement gathered so much oxygen from those few words. And this is the man who produced them.